Okay, let's call the meeting to order, please. Okay. Okay, would the clerk call the roll, please?
McGuire,
Here.
Patterson, Rector, Storr, Summers,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Dorsland, Tinsley, Batchaspati,
Here.
Woken,
Here.
Young,
Here.
Clemens, Clifford, Cowart,
Present.
Eisenman,
Here.
Esri,
Here.
Hurtado, Goss,
Here.
Harper,
Here.
Ingram,
Yep.
King Taylor, Rosales.
Here.
Okay, there's quorum present. The meeting is called to order. For the prayer this week, I would like to do more of an inspirational item. A friend of mine died last week, and I was attending the funeral. Maybe many of you know him. It was Roger Grace. He was a fifth-generation farmer in this county, and his son is continuing that by making the sixth generation. And he was at one time in the year 2000 the farm leader of the year. And in his speech, he said this: "Our forefathers faced problems that we have outgrown. We now face problems, the very existence they could not foresee. My hope is that we continue the legacy of our forefathers, the legacy of sustaining the land and sustaining economically viable business for future generations." Let's rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please read the notice of the meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on April 18th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in the Lyle Shields Meeting Room, Brookings Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, in said county for the purpose of allowing and ordering payments of claims against the county, receiving and acting upon reports of committees, and such other matters as may be brought before said meeting, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Okay, thank you. Next is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion? Mr. Harper?
Second.
Mr. Ingram? Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Next is the date and time of the next regular meetings. We have several standing committees coming up, the Committee of the Whole, and then the county board meetings. There's including a study session again this month for the strategic plan. Again, we will not be videotaping that session because we'll be moving around and in smaller groups. So those will be the meetings coming up. Number 8 is public participation. Do we have any public tonight that would like to make comments? I don't have any cards up here. Seeing none, public participation is closed. Moving on to the consent agenda. This will take a roll call. Can I get a motion in favor to approve the consent agenda? Mr. Vashaspati, Mr. Summers. Any discussion? Okay, this is the roll call vote, please.
McGuire,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Rector,
Yes.
Storr, Summers, Taylor,
Yes.
Batchaspati, Woken,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Clemens, Clifford, Cowart, Eisenman,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Hurtado,
Yes.
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
Ingram,
Yes.
Rosales.
Okay, motion passes. Next is communications, and I am aware of one communication for the board. We have had a former board member, Shirley Stillinger, that has died, and she will have a celebration of life on May the 4th from 3 to 6 p.m. at the Stone Creek Event Center in Urbana, and has invited any of the board members that would like to attend. And I've asked Lorraine tonight, as we usually do, to read the board member's resolution from when she was here serving on the board. Lorraine actually served with her, so I've asked her to read that.
Resolution number 3534, honoring the Champaign County Board member Shirley Stillinger. Whereas Shirley Stillinger has served as a Champaign County Board member since December 1980, and whereas Shirley Stillinger has admirably represented the citizens of Champaign County Board District 8 and 9 by full commitment to the responsibility of the county government. By her guidance in shaping politics and programs of the Champaign County Board, by working in partnership with fellow board members and officials of Champaign County, and by consulting, service, and dedication to the best interests of all the peoples of Champaign County. Now therefore, be it resolved that the County Board of Champaign County hereby recognize that the service of Shirley Stillinger has been an access to the County Board and to the people of Champaign County, and expresses gratitude and sincere appreciation for her 14 years of service, and extends its best wishes to her. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be presented to Shirley Stillinger family with sincere appreciation. Presented, adopted, and approved and recorded this 21st day of February, AD 1995.
And we did send the resolution to her family as well. So just so that they have a copy. Any other communication from the board? Mr. Young?
Thank you, County Executive Darlene. So I have this flyer here that's put on by the City of Champaign. They are promoting Champaign Diversity Advancement Program, acronym better known as CDAP. It is an exclusive workforce program that focuses on entrepreneurship and minority-based businesses. They are teaming up with Farworth Group, which is an employment-owned institution. They train people, give them tips how to be productive when it comes down to businesses, small businesses. It would take place Monday, May 20th from 4:30 to 6:30. What I can do, I have this flyer here. I pretty much have everybody email. I can email it to everybody. And I was told by one of the city council person, it will be nice to see some of the elected officials from the county board there for future purposes, just in case we eventually partner with them with this program. So I would send it to you guys and repeat it again. It's a while from now, but it's Monday, May 20th from 4:30 to 6:30. Thank you very much.
Any other communication? Ms. Furtado?
I wanted to mention that a celebration of life for Bernadine Stake will be held on April 20th at 1 p.m. at the Saturday at the Unitarian Universalist Church. For those of you who knew Bernadine, she was a force to be reckoned with on the Urbana Council for some 15 years, was a member of the Planning Commission for another 11 years, and just did some really groundbreaking work, right? She helped pass a human rights ordinance that was one of the first in the country to support LGBTQ rights. She helped pass a fair housing ordinance that addressed redlining in Urbana. So she is an inspiration for me and her celebration of life. She passed away this past February, will be on Saturday, so I wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Mr. Fashasbadi?
Yeah, I was informed that the Illinois Solar Lottery took place, I think last week. Only one of the solar farms we approved So these are the 2 megawatt farms, the smaller ones, not the really big one, not the really big Baywan one, but the of the smaller ones we approved, one of the ones by Sydney got through the lottery, so they'll get that funding from the state. The exact number of farms or of solar farms could change a little bit, because if someone decides that they can't actually do it, then there's a wait list, and if there's a developer who has like multiple solar farms, they can move their credits from one solar farm to another. But so far we have one, which is, we talked about a lot of farms, we got one, so
Mr. Ingram?
One, would like to remind everybody that not this weekend, but the following, the 27th, is the Illinois Marathon. For all of you who will be driving anywhere in Champaign-Urbana that day, plan now to use the big outer perimeter ring road so that there are less social media complaints about how bad the traffic is, or how you could not have possibly have known that this was happening. It will be happening on that day. Second, tomorrow evening, downtown Champaign at the New Covenant Fellowship is the second annual street fight. Sorry, no, that's the wrong. I'm going to start that again. It's not a street fight. The second annual Street Fest Against Violence. So it's actually contrary to the word that I said. Once again, that's the second annual Street Fest Against Violence. It will be happening between 4 and 7 o'clock. Lots of activities, lots of musicians, including a performance by Dr. Young's son and a performance by a group that I happen to be in. But it's a pretty cool event, and it will be outside, and it's open for everybody, and it's all ages. Thanks.
He forgot to mention that you're going to be performing too, right? Oh, alrighty. And I'm taking part in the marathon, my 11th year. Walking, that is.
Any other announcements?
I also wanted to mention that Workers' Memorial Day, which is a day where we honor workers who died on the job in Champaign County, will be this April 27th on Sunday at 1 p.m. at Dodds Park, where there is a memorial. I should also say, if any of you ever hear of in your districts of somebody who dies while at work, contact the AFL-CIO. They don't have to be a union member. Just anybody who dies at work, they will put their name on the memorial. They usually have the family out. They lay wreaths. Usually different people speak at the event. It's a pretty moving event. And if you've not had a chance to check out the memorial at Dodds Park, but it'll be April 27th at 1 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes? There are 2 sets here.
So moved.
Mr. Rector? Second? Mr. Ingram? Okay, this is for the minutes of the regular meeting, March 21st, 2019, and the study session for March 26th, 2019. Is there any discussion? Mr. Esri?
Yes, thank you. Page 50 of our packet, under the approval of the minutes, at the bottom of the page, it says Board Member Vachaspati offered an omnibus motion. Won't read it all. Seconded by Board Member Rector, but then it doesn't record anything about the vote.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure
It
we
should
did
say
vote
you
on it,
passed
but we
that.
didn't. But it's just
Okay.
not in there that
All
we
right.
actually voted on it.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that correction, anything else? Mr. Vachaspati?
I mean, I will say that if we're not going to, especially if we're not going to be recording these study sessions, these minutes don't tell members of the public what's going on at, the study session. From a point of view of government transparency, I think it's totally inadequate.
Okay. I'm not sure what we would put since they're activities, but, I mean, there will be a report at the end of the activities, probably, as much as we can summarize. People are certainly welcome to come to the meeting. Mr. Storr?
Just a minor spelling thing. Under communications, Superfund is a single word. It refers to the CERCLA legislation. Superfund.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? Any more discussion? Okay, those in favor of accepting the minutes? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next is the standing committee summaries of action. We have a summary of action from April 3rd from the County Facilities Committee. It is accepted and placed on file. We have a summary of action taken at the April 5th meeting for the Highway and Transportation Committee. It is accepted and placed on file. Moving to the areas of responsibility, we have a summary of action taken on April the 9th at the Committee of the Whole meeting that is accepted and placed on file. And then the Finance Committee this evening, Tammy Ogden is going to make a presentation about the 5-year financial forecast. Tammy, would you like to come up? I think there's a PowerPoint presentation too, so you can watch on the screens.
The forecast that you have in front of you, as well as this PowerPoint presentation, are also available on the website underneath the County Board's tab. There's a link on the left that says 5-year financial forecast if you also would like a copy of these slides. So the forecast that I'm presenting tonight is for fiscal years 2019 through 2023. And it's basically a framework for financial decisions and planning as the county moves into the fiscal year 2020 budget. Because it's difficult to forecast beyond 1 year, the purpose of the forecast is really to identify trends in revenues and expenditures rather than, hard and fast numbers for the different categories. The focus of tonight's forecast will be the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund. So starting with some of the economic conditions, the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index for 2019, taxes that will be collected in 2020, is 1.9%. This is down 0.2% from 2018 and also 2017, which were both 2.1%. The Flash Index, which is a University of Illinois reading of the economy, it has exceeded 105 since July of 2018. And any reading over 100 indicates an expansion of the economy. The Consumer Conference Board has given in a March 2019 report an indication that consumer confidence has been softening since last summer. And additionally, the National Association for Business Economics survey, which is a panel of, I think, at least 50 economists and forecasters, predict a 2020 recession. Moody's also predicts a mid-2020 recession and has said in the state of Illinois' forecast that Illinois is ill-prepared for this recession. I'm sure that doesn't come as a surprise. So some of the financial challenges that the county is facing are things that we talked about in 2018. Prior to that, if you were here, in 2017 and in 2016. One of those predominantly is the state of Illinois and legislative and administrative decisions that are passed on that affect the county's revenue sources. Income tax is one that in 2017, the legislature took 10% of what was to be distributed to Champaign County. It was supposed to be a one-time cut. Yet in 2018, they extended that cut for another year at 5%. And year to date, that has cost the county $422,000. In Governor Pritzker's 2020 operating budget, he has proposed yet again another extension of the 5% cut. So this forecast does assume that that extension will continue. Also, personal property replacement taxes is something that the state legislature has been making administrative decisions that have affected those revenues, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail later on. State collection fee, they implemented in 2017 at 2%. That impacted the county's public safety sales tax. It was lowered to 1.5% in 2018, but is anticipated that that will be a permanent cut also. And then also cuts to some of the county's reimbursement and grant funding, predominantly the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, and which is a reimbursement or partial reimbursement for probation and court security salaries. And one other thing I'll talk about, we don't have a lot of information. I don't have a lot of information to give you, but I'll reference it later, is also the fees and fines legislation that will be effective July 1st. That is anticipated to have an impact on county revenues. Some of the other challenges that the county has been facing are its infrastructure needs. In this fiscal year, we increased our investment in facilities by over $600,000. And in 2018, the 10-year capital facilities plan was implemented by the county board. And that will require another almost $1.1 million in fiscal year 2020. One thing to keep in mind about that plan is that it does not include the downtown sheriff's office and correctional center. Also, technology needs is something that has posed a challenge for the county. And we, in 2019, we have moved to DevNet, so we've moved off the AS400 for our real estate tax cycle system. We also, effective on April 1st, moved to a software as a service for jail management and the sheriff's civil processing and business office software. And in 2020, intend to move the county's in-house financial system off of the AS400. Restricted revenues is another thing that is a challenge for the county. We have limited control over the majority of our revenue sources, and this puts growing pressure on the general fund revenues to cover general fund expenditures, particularly as the county faces increases in personnel, commodities, and services costs, while also experiencing cuts that are passed down predominantly from the state. So starting with general fund revenues, this is a chart of the county's property tax revenues specifically for the general fund. And you can see fiscal years 2014 through 2018 are identified in a different color. 2019 through 2023 are still projections. We have not received our extension letters yet for 2019. However, we anticipate receiving those very soon. Next Friday. The county has been able to rely on consistent increases in property tax revenues predominantly because of the inflationary growth that's allowed under PTEL. And I think I used that acronym earlier for those who aren't familiar with it. Is Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, and also new property that is added to the tax rolls. In 2019, we were able to reallocate about $260,000 from the IMRF levy to the general fund levy, and that's because we had a drop in our IMRF rate. However, we have received our preliminary rates for fiscal year 2020, and they have gone up, and they actually are higher than what they were in fiscal year 2018. So we do not anticipate being able to reallocate any of the IMRF levy in fiscal year 2020. Sales taxes in 2018 reflected strong growth. The quarter-cent sales tax, which is collected countywide, was an increase of 3.6% over last fiscal year. The 5- and 10-year average growth for the quarter-cent sales tax is 1.6% and 1.2%. We have received 2 distributions for fiscal year 2019, and compared to the same period last fiscal year, the distributions are down 5% for the quarter-cent sales tax. So revenue is conservatively budgeted. However, it may be overstated. It's a little bit too early to tell. The 1 cent sales tax, which is collected in the unincorporated area, has been quite a bit more volatile than the quarter-cent sales tax. In 2015, That tax declined 16% over the prior fiscal year. And then in that was 2015. In 2016 through 2018, we have seen increases of 2.7%, 17.7%, and 6.3%. Yet the first two distributions in 2019 reflect negative 4.1% over last fiscal year. So some of the volatility in this revenue source comes from the fact that the county's top 10 taxpayers make up 62% of total revenues. And I know I mentioned that when I have given the monthly budget report. So the loss of one of those taxpayers can have a significant impact on revenues. Use taxes have shown strong performance since 2010, and that is predominantly because of the growth in e-commerce sales. One thing that was not budgeted for in 2019 that we expect will have a positive impact on revenues is the result of the Wayfair ruling, and that was the remote sales tax ruling. So we were uncertain at the time of budget what kind of revenue the county might expect from that. The Illinois Department of Revenue, the last numbers I saw from them were that we could use 13 cents per capita as their best estimate as to what the county would receive for that ruling. So that translates to an additional $50,000 for Champaign County. State reimbursement is predominantly the reimbursement for juvenile and court services officers, and it comes from the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts. And the timing of reimbursement has had a significant impact on the county's budget. I mentioned during our last monthly budget report that we had an early distribution of revenues, which added about $183,000 to the fiscal year 2018 budget, where if the state doesn't consistently distribute those funds moving forward, could have an impact on our fiscal year 2019 budget. If you look at the chart here, this was provided by Mike Williams, who's the director of that department, and the total decrease that the county has experienced since 2016 is $640,000. And Probation and Court Services has a special revenue budget that has helped absorb some of that impact, but some of that has also fallen on the general fund. For purposes of this forecast, I have forecasted moving forward those revenues as flat, but there is a risk that there could be further declines. Personal property replacement tax is a tax on corporations and partnerships, and it is distributed based on a formula. And what the state has been doing, and I know you can't see exactly probably what the numbers are on the left chart, but I just wanted to kind of give you a visual of the increasing amount of diversions that the state has been applying to this revenue source since 2009. So in 2009, the state diverted $21.6 million away from PPRT revenues prior to applying the distribution formula. And in state fiscal year 2019, those diversions are over $300 million. So that has translated to a reduction in county revenues over time, which you can see on the chart on the right. I only went back to 2013, I believe, on that one. Again, for purposes of the forecast, I am projecting flat revenues moving forward, but there is a potential for continuing diversions and thereby reduced revenues for the county. As I previously mentioned, income tax is something that the state has cut and intends, it appears, to continue to cut. And year to date, I mentioned, I believe, that we had lost $422,000 in revenue. One thing that, even with that cut continuing, we do still project that there will be minimal growth in income tax, with the exception of what's not reflected here is that any change in the 2020 census to the unincorporated population, because this is a revenue source that is based on per capita. So if the unincorporated area were to see a reduction or increase in the number of residents, that would have an impact on this revenue source. Licenses and permits is predominantly made up of revenue stamps for real estate transactions, and those are $1.50 per $1,000 of real estate transaction. The county collects that and then turns around and distributes 2/3 of that back to the state of Illinois. So there is also a corresponding expenditure to this revenue. At the end of February of 2019, revenue stamp revenues were down 22% over the same period in the prior fiscal year. It's still a little bit early to tell, but this revenue category may be overstated for 2019. And then fees and fines. And this is something that the state has implemented new legislation, which will become effective July 1st of 2019. The circuit clerk's office and the circuit court are working on analyzing this legislation. It is expected to have an impact to county revenues. And the county board is going to have to take action on this prior to July 1st, or the county will not be able to collect any fees or fines, which will have a significant impact on revenues. So more information is going to be given to you, I believe, in May. Katie Blakeman will be here, and possibly Lori Hansen, to let you know what their analysis of this legislation is and make recommendations for moving forward. Before we move to expenditures, I'll stop in case there are any questions. I'm trying to fly through this because it's just a lot of information, so I apologize. Yes.
Yeah, I had a question about the income tax distributions. Do you know, I know there's some bill making its way through the legislature about, with changes to the income tax structure in Illinois. Do you know, have they talked at all about if that is going to affect sort of our distribution from that at all?
So the research that I did was on the Illinois Municipal League, and they did not, in their projections for that, did not discuss that as being a potential impact.
Okay, I guess maybe it's early. Okay, so moving on to expenditures, starting with personnel. Personnel costs in the general fund account for 65% of expenditures in fiscal year 2018. The county is currently in the process of negotiating its labor contracts for AFSCME. And another impact of the state legislature that the county is analyzing will be the new minimum wage legislation, which the county will be required to meet. The new minimum is $15, and we have until January. Well, it's an incremental plan to get everyone to the new minimum by January 1st of 2025. So presently, I believe there are 3 grades within the AFSCME units that are below $15 an hour, and I think that there is 1 grade in the non-bargaining unit that is below $15 an hour. Health insurance is something that, although the county has seen favorable increases this year at 2% and last year at 2.7%, is still a concern. In the year before that, we had an 11.6% increase, but that only came after negotiations with the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee and the county's broker, because the initial quote that was given to the county was 51%. So the county has been able to adjust its plan over the years, including changing its plan, increasing its deductible to try to circumvent significant increases in health insurance, along with negotiating. But there's always a concern of, a significant increase in this cost. For purposes of the forecast, I have used 5% as the projected increase.
One thing I wanted to mention, I want to go back to personnel, is that the county has been experiencing recruiting and retention issues. This is something that we talked to the Labor Committee about last month. We have had a significant number of employees leaving, in particular for other government agencies. So this is something that department heads and elected officials have expressed concern about, and we just wanted to make the county board aware of that. I'm sorry, I'm going to shift back to health insurance again because I also forgot to mention that, we had a underspending in health insurance in 2018. We had an increase in the number of waivers for 2018. For 2019, that expenditure was budgeted as flat because we weren't certain if those who had waived insurance in 2018 might come back on the county's plan after we had a year of Blue Cross Blue Shield. But the waivers are consistent with last year. So at this point, I project that we will underspend that line again. Moving to commodities, nearly half of the expenditures for commodities are for purchase document stamps, and that is the corresponding expenditure for the revenue stamps that I mentioned previously. For the forecast, there is a projected increase of 3% for medical, dental, mental health services and MetCAD funding, and also gas and oil, and then 1.9% projected increase for other services in this forecast. I'm sorry. Okay, services. The largest expenditure line in services is medical, dental, mental health, and that's about $1 million for the county. That's for both of the jails and also for the juvenile detention center, and I think the coroner also has some expenditures budgeted in that line. So moving to the transfer to the capital asset replacement fund. Both the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund have transfers to the capital asset replacement fund where we budget for the department's equipment, vehicles, technology, and also facilities. And so in 2019, some of the things that were added to the capital asset replacement fund, the transfer to the capital asset replacement fund were DevNet, which is the real estate cycle software, and Security Operations Center was also something new that was added. In 2019, we were actually able to provide full funding for future equipment purchases. I don't anticipate that we'll be able to do that in fiscal year 2020, predominantly because of the significant increase that is required per the facilities capital plan. So as I mentioned earlier, the county increased its facility spending by over $600,000. The plan in 2020 will require an additional increase of almost $1.1 million. Something that is included in the capital asset replacement fund for fiscal year 2020 that will be a new expenditure for the county is CAMA software. And this is software that township assessors will need to utilize in order to be able to use the county's new DevNet system for the real estate tax cycle. This could possibly be a partially shared cost between the county and townships. I anticipate that Paula Bates will be coming to talk to you more about that probably in May. At this point, I have included the full cost of what that CAMA software is in the forecast. In year one, that is expected to be about $86,000, and in year two, about $51,000. So as I mentioned earlier, per the facilities capital plan, the county will need to increase its investment for facilities by almost $1.1 million. And what that means is an investment in fiscal year 2020 of $2.2 million. Even with that level of investment, it still falls short of what the recommended facilities condition assessment required that was done in 2015. But it's a significant improvement over what the county has historically been investing in facilities, which is only $532,000. The Capital Asset Replacement Fund does not include funding for the ERP or replacement of the financial system. ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, and it's interchangeable with the county's financial system. I didn't include that in this forecast because at this time, I don't have really good numbers as to what the cost is going to be. As you know, we are in the process of hiring a project manager to do a needs assessment, and that will result in the issuance of an RFP and ultimately responses and then selection of a vendor. Hopefully we'll be able to get through that process fairly quickly, so we'll have some good numbers to use for budgeting. What I can tell you is that when we worked with the GFOA, they had provided us with an approximate 5-year cost of the system and indicated it could be as much as $1.8 million to $2.5 million over a 5-year period. That would depend on the level of services that the county required and also whether the software would be hosted or cloud-based. The forecast does not also include reserve funding for future fiscal years. Like I said, we were able to do in 2019. It's current only funding, so the items that are scheduled for replacement would be funded in the year that they are scheduled to be replaced. It also does not include funding for relocation of the sheriff's office and correctional center. In the general fund, there's a debt certificate for the Art Bartel facility. That's budgeted about $190,000. Also included in the 2019 budget is redemption of the 2015 bonds. And those are the 1-cent alternate revenue bonds that the county issued for additional work that needed to be done at the nursing home. So this amount in 2019 is about $1.85 million. There's also a corresponding revenue amount budgeted for 2000. It's actually not in the original budget. We amended the budget after the fiscal year to reflect that additional revenue and then payment for the redemption of the 2015 bonds. And so those are scheduled to be redeemed on April 30th, so at the end of this month. And what that means is that the county will be relieved of that debt service, and that frees up about $280,000 in expenditure for the county this year and moving forward. Also budgeted is repayment of the county's promissory note, which was issued in 2018 for $1.98 million. This was done because the county transferred $1.98 million to the nursing home, so the outstanding accounts payable through fiscal year 2018 could be paid, and then we issued a promissory note in order to restore that cash to the general fund. So I don't have this for a slide because it's just too much detail, and I apologize. After I printed these, I realized didn't number the pages. But I think it's from the back, page 6. It's the forecast summary. A couple things I wanted to point out on this. Again, keeping in mind that the forecast is based on revenue and expenditure trends. About the middle of the page, you can see the revenue to expenditure difference line. And for fiscal year 2019, at this point, very early in the fiscal year, so subject to change, the changes that I've been talking about, the impact of the fees and fines legislation, whether sales taxes will gain momentum between now and the end of the fiscal year. But at this point, there is a revenue to expenditure surplus projected of about $900,000. That's predominantly being driven by decreased personnel costs due to turnover, savings projected in health insurance, and also the redemption of the bonds, which resulted in about $280,000 in expenditure savings. Also, keep in mind that if the county did not receive the distributions for AOIC funding in the same, timely manner that it anticipates, that it could impact this number as well. So the projected fund balance, I've given you two scenarios here. You can see in the first projected fund balance line, 4.1 million or 9.9% as a percentage of the expenditure budget. This would be the expectation if the nursing home fund was not able to reimburse the county for the $1.98 million promissory note. Then this is where we project that 2019 fund balance would be at the end of the fiscal year. If the nursing home fund is able to pay back the general fund for the promissory note, allowing us then to repay the note, then the fund balance projection would be 6.1 million or 14.8% as a percentage of the expenditure budget. So 14.8% is above our recommended minimum of 12.5%, but a couple of percentage points short of our target fund balance of 16.7%. Also keep in mind that $307,000 of the fund balance is reserved, and that is to offset potential liability in the hospital property tax case. $307,427. Yes, it's at the bottom of the table in the middle. The other thing I want to point out that is not part of the fund balance is the outstanding loan that the county has given to the nursing home that totals $1 million. And that was the 5 months of the $200,000 AP loan. So that is not an impact to this fund balance, but it is a balance sheet transaction. It is amount that is owed to the general fund.
Thank you for this work. So when you're talking about the projected balance, if there's non-repayment of the promissory note, are we not thinking about paying the promissory note?
That's my next thing
Is it? Okay.
that I'm going to talk about.
And then if I look at this, either one of these two forecasts of the fund balance and the percentages, either one of them goes down the one without the promissory note paid off, or the other one. One goes to 2.6%, and the other one goes down to 7.3%. Is that
Right.
the forecast?
So that would be if, we allowed expenditures to grow, as I had mentioned earlier. And I'll go over that a little bit more when I go over this chart that's up here. That's a forecast without efforts of the county board to ensure that it has a balanced budget.
Will you go over suggested efforts, or are you talking about cutting staff, or?
No, again, setting a framework for what we need to be keeping in mind when we move into the 2020 budget. So in May, we'll be bringing a budget process resolution to the county board with recommendations for the county board to pass on to department heads and elected officials for preparation of their budgets. So talking about the $1.98 million.
Tammy, Stephanie has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Before you flip over there, on the personnel on 2020, which I'm assuming it includes healthcare, is the healthcare, the 5% on healthcare, are you calculating that to 2020 from the budgeted 2019 healthcare, or from what you anticipate is going to be the actual expenditure from healthcare?
The actual.
Okay, thanks.
So at this time, I am recommending that the county delay having the nursing home fund reimburse the county for the promissory note. And the main reason for that is that, we are still receiving, first of all, we haven't defeased and redeemed the bonds yet, so we will do that at the end of the month. Second of all, we are still receiving accounts payable and accounts receivable. But most importantly, the county needs to make sure that we monitor cash flow while we are working with the buyer to make sure that there are payer sources for the public aid pending residents. And for that reason, I think we need to defer having the nursing home fund reimburse the county for the promissory note. The intent would be for us to make that happen before the end of the fiscal year so we can then repay the promissory note.
Tammy, is there an expectation that this revenue would offset some of the promissory note? The $1.98 million promissory note that we would get these revenues from the nursing home resident?
That is entirely going to depend on how quickly we're able to ensure that residents have payer sources. So at this point, there are 33, the last number that I heard was 33 residents without payer sources. I think there are 19 that were in pretty solid position to be matched with a payer source. But again, until we move forward with that and find out how quickly it is that these residents will be matched up with payer sources, I think we need to be cautious and not pay back right away the $1.9 million from the nursing home fund to the general fund. Okay, so the chart that you see on the slide, the blue line reflects the forecasted revenue, which, as you can see, is below both scenarios for forecasted expenditure. The orange line, and I apologize, it doesn't look very, very orange, but the top line is a 1.9% increase for commodities and services increases, with the exception of a 3% increase for gas, oil, medical, dental, mental health, and MetCAD services. And the gray line, which is in the middle, is a projected expenditure forecast if commodities and services were held flat, with the exception of a 3% increase for gas and oil, medical, dental, mental health, and MetCAD services. So as you can see, in either one of these scenarios, that the county is going to be working to ensure that we close a revenue to expenditure deficit. And that's not really unusual. I mean, we have had to do that for, many fiscal years. And that predominantly happens through department heads and elected officials working with the county to identify savings in their budgets. Also can happen through the shift of revenues and expenditures between the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund and the General Fund.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
So moving on to the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. Revenue was healthy in 2018, just like the other sales taxes. And the administrative fee did, of course, have an impact on revenues. Year to date, the county has lost $151,000 in revenues that it could have used for public safety purposes. The first two distributions of fiscal year 2019 were down 3.7% compared to the same period in 2018. And the 5 and 10-year average growth for the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund is 1.2% and 0.9%. For expenditures, 47% of the Public Safety Sales Tax revenues go to pay debt service. And all of the Public Safety Sales Tax debt service issues are paid in full at the end of fiscal year 2028. So some of the programs that Public Safety Sales Tax revenues support are delinquency prevention, intervention, and diversion. And this is the Youth Assessment Center. The county uses 5% of its Public Safety Sales Tax fund to support that program. Also, reentry. Historically, I think since 2014, the county has use public safety sales tax funds in the amount of $100,000 to support reentry. Also, the wages and health insurance of the jail classification lieutenant and the specialty court coordinator are paid from public safety sales tax funds. Justice system, technology equipment and services. The court's technology software, which is JANO, is partially paid for out of public safety sales tax fund. And there's also a transfer to the capital asset replacement fund for technology and equipment of public safety departments. In 2019, the jail management system and the sheriff's business office and civil processing software was paid for out of public safety sales tax fund. And also partial funding for METCAD 911 costs are paid out of public safety sales tax fund. A portion of the public safety facility utilities and maintenance is paid from public safety sales tax fund. So here's the projection for fiscal year 19 through fiscal year 2023. And you can see beginning in fiscal year 2020, there is some capacity between revenues and expenditures. And moving forward, that capacity holds. That the county really needs to focus on prioritizing to address the additional technology needs and facility needs of public safety offices. And so one of those would be the financial system. The Public Safety Sales Tax Fund can pay for 50% of that system, as public safety services make up 50% of the general corporate funds budget. Also, in future fiscal years, the law enforcement records management system and METCAD dispatch software will need to be upgraded, and that will be done in conjunction with other local entities, but it will have an impact on the county because we are members of those entities. So whatever those costs will be shared costs between all of the local governments. Of the $2.2 million that I mentioned that were planned for capital improvements in fiscal year 2020, $1.6 million of those scheduled projects is for improvements at the satellite jail and at METCAD. The county's public safety facilities are some of the poorest rated facilities. As I mentioned, the sheriff's office and the downtown correctional center, that is rated as poor. The emergency management agency garage is rated as poor. The emergency operations center and juvenile detention center and coroner's office are rated as fair. The county does plan to do some work, actually has already started planning for the work to replace the roof at the satellite jail in this fiscal year. So just a reminder, I know I've said it, but as a reminder, the Sheriff's Office and Correctional Center were not included in the county's 10-year facilities plan, but they do have a significant backlog of deferred maintenance. And for those of you who were here when we were under the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice, the ADA work for those facilities has not been completed. Because at that time we were in discussions about vacating that facility. So it is essential for the county to resume discussions about what its plan is going to be for that facility. Okay, and in summary, you can see what I have tried to do here is show the projected revenue to expenditure differences for the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund. And Mr. McGuire, when I was referring earlier about, opportunity to shift funding, this is what I was talking about, that there are services, expenses that are in the general fund that can be offset with public safety sales tax revenues. And so what I've tried to do is just identify what the capacity would be available in each of the fiscal years for additional facility and technology investment. And as you can see here, there really isn't any. But keep in mind, this forecast was also based on allowing expenditures to increase, as I had mentioned, at either 3% or the 1.9%. So pulling back on that, keeping commodities and services expenditures flat will be one way that the county could look at reducing this projected revenue to expenditure difference. But what I really want to express is that without efforts of the departments and the elected officials and the county board to balance the budget, it is not going to be possible for us to replace our financial system with what you see here in terms of the forecast. So we're going to have to really take efforts to work together to make sure that we restrain expenditures and we match expenditures with current revenues unless additional revenue sources are identified to ensure that we're able to continue operations at the level that we're operating and also ensure that the county is able to fund its replacement of its financial system beginning in fiscal year 2020. So as I mentioned earlier, in May, we will be bringing a budget process resolution with recommendations as we begin the 2020 budget. And then in July, we will be meeting with department heads and elected officials to prepare their budgets. By that time, we should have better data to analyze revenue and expenditures. And so obviously there will be some fluctuation between now and then that we'll incorporate into the budget, with the expectation that we will have our legislative budget hearings at the end of August. Did I make a half hour?
Just really quickly, I know you touched on it for a second, the problem with retention of staff. I'm assuming with them moving on to places like Champaign-Urbana, the university, things like that, our problem is that the salary rate is not as competitive?
Yes.
Okay.
Predominantly wages. I know in some cases it may be, working hours.
Sure.
For 24/7 operations.
Okay, thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on now to new business. Can I get a motion to adopt resolution number 2019-91, authorizing payment of claims?
So moved.
Mr. Rosales? Mr. Clifford? Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? Those opposed? Motion passes. Can I get a motion to adopt resolution number 2019-92, authorizing purchases not following purchasing policy? Mr. Goss?
Second.
Mr. Rosales? Discussion? Mr. Storr?
Hi, since Ms. Blakeman is here, could I ask, good evening. I was curious about court document storage, custom folders and traffic jackets, $8,521 and change. Why was this not following purchasing policy?
Well, we have discussed this with George, with the auditor and his office. It was submitted as a voucher rather than as a purchase order, and it needed to be in purchase order format. So we have submitted it as a purchase order for the any subsequent invoices. If I could not have to buy file folders anymore, I would be very happy to not have that expense, but unfortunately.
And how could we help you? How could that is that because of moving to an electronic format?
Yes, so some agencies have begun to issue citations electronically. These particular folders are very specific for traffic citations. They're in a specific format. They're very expensive to produce. There's only one vendor we can find that even can produce them anymore. All citations, regardless of format submitted, all state police citations are written electronically now. The sheriff's office and Mahomet PD have gone toward e-citations. The sheriff's office is working on implementation right now, which means that they are issuing the citations electronically, and the data and the image of the ticket goes into our system. However, the court still requires the paper. So,
Is that the judges are requiring the paper?
yes.
Oh.
Diplomatically. Yeah, I don't know how else to say that. Yes.
I see.
We have one paperless courtroom now, and we're very, very excited about that. It's a low volume courtroom, but we're testing. So I hope that by 2020 we can get at least a few more courtrooms paperless. But it will take them other folks being willing to use computers.
Mr. Ingram?
No further comment.
In researching all of this, are there prominent examples of other municipalities, cities, counties that are fully paperless
Yes.
at their courthouses?
Mhm.
Any that you can just off the top? I'd like to look this up myself.
Well, Sangamon County has a walk-in court system that is fully paperless, and the state's attorney and I are trying to find a time to go over and visit just to see how they use how the process works, because they have the same case management system that we do, JANO, and their process works really smoothly. So she and I are planning to go and visit and see how we could potentially implement that in Champaign County.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thanks, Katie. Can I get a motion for item C? Mr. Goss?
Yeah, I move adoption of resolution number 2019-81, authorizing budget amendment 19-00026, Fund 188, Social Security Department 044 Nursing Home, increased appropriations $133,875, increased revenue none from the fund balance. Reason, since there was not an initial budget for the nursing home for FY 2019, there was no appropriations for paying Social Security benefits of the nursing home employees in this budget. The amendment reflects the total Social Security benefits paid for nursing home employees in FY 2019 and the amount needed to restore the county general Social Security appropriation used to remit the Social Security payments for the nursing home.
Second.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear who seconded. Mr. Ingram? Okay, any more discussion? Okay, those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, this is a roll call. This requires 15 votes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Patterson? Rector? Yes. Storr? Yes. Summers?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Batchespati? Yes. Woken? Yes. Young?
Yes.
Clemens? Yes. Clifford? Yes. Cowart?
Yes.
Eisenman?
Yes.
Esri?
Yes.
Furtado? Yes. Goss?
Yes.
Harper?
Yes.
Ingram?
Yes.
Rosales?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Can I get a motion for item D? Mr. Goss?
I move adoption of resolution number 2019-82, authorizing budget amendment 19-00027 from Fund 088 Illinois Municipal Retirement to Department 044 Nursing Home. Increased appropriations $97,072. Increased revenue none from fund balance. Since there was not an initial budget for the nursing home for FY 2019, there was no appropriation for paying IMR benefits of the nursing home employees in this budget. This budget reflects the total IMRF benefits paid for the nursing home employees in 2019 and the amount needed to restore the general county IMRF appropriation used to remit IMRF payments for the nursing home.
Second, please. Mr. Storr? Any
Yes.
discussion? Seeing none, this also requires a roll call vote and 15 votes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Patterson, Rector,
Yes.
Storr,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Vachaspati. Wilkin. Young,
Yes.
Clemens, Clifford, Cowart, Eisenman,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado, Goss,
Yes.
Harper, Ingram,
Yes.
Rosales.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, we're on item E, adoption of resolution 2019-93 honoring retired county board member Diane Michaels. Can the executive get a motion? Mr. Esri, second. Ms. Furtado. Ms. Michaels is here this evening. And Mr. Clifford will read the resolution, please.
I'd love to. Resolution number 2019-93, resolution honoring retired county board member Diane Michaels. Whereas Diane Michaels was sworn in as Champaign County board member on November 19th, 2009, and whereas Diane Michaels has served the citizens of Champaign County as a representative of the Champaign County Board District 2 from November 19th, 2009 through December 31st, 2017. And whereas during her tenure as a Champaign County board member, Diane Michaels served on the following standing committees: Policy, Personnel and Appointments Committee, Justice and Social Services Committee, Committee of the Whole, Finance Committee of the Whole, and the Highway and Transportation Committee. And whereas during her tenure as Champaign County board member, Diane Michaels also served in a liaison position as the county board's representative on the Champaign County Head Start Policy Board, the Regional Office of Education Board, the Rural Transportation Advisory Group, the Region 8 Human Service Transportation Plan Policy Committee, and the Lincoln Legacy Committee. And whereas from 2012 to 2016, Diane Michaels served in a leadership role as the Assistant Deputy Chair of the Finance Committee of the Whole, Chair of the Litigation Committee from 2015 to 2016, Vice Chair from the Litigation Committee 2016 to 2017, and as the Deputy Chair of the Finance Committee of the Whole in 2017. And whereas the Champaign County Board seeks to publicly recognize the commitment and dedication of Diane Michaels, who served the citizens of Champaign County as an elected official over a term of 8 years. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Champaign County Board hereby recognizes the service of Diane Michaels and the benefit that service has brought to county government. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be presented to Diane Michaels in recognition of her tenure of service to the citizens of Champaign County. Presented, adopted, approved by the County Board this 18th day of April, AD 2019. And I have a nice copy.
Okay, this just requires a simple majority. Those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, I think what you read was more comprehensive than what is in our packet.
Yeah.
There were so if we could just make sure, I think all of the accomplishments should be included. Oh, there was an additional one. I'm
Yep.
sorry, I didn't see that. Sorry, I didn't see that. And also, I just wanted to say it was a great pleasure to work with you. And I said this in our caucus, you were unfailingly kind, and I really enjoyed being on the Finance Committee with you.
Mr. Ingram?
Would also just like to thank Diane for waiting till the very end of this long meeting, when sometimes that might have been an earlier item that might have let her get home at a reasonable hour. So thanks for that.
Actually, I did ask Diane about that before the meeting. We had a discussion before the meeting, but thanks for that. Yeah, usually we put those at the beginning. Okay, now we're ready for voting. This requires a simple majority. Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, I think there's no other business this evening, so, Mr. McGuire.
Yes. After listening to the five-year forecast, I had some questions. I think I'd like to understand better the disposition of what's going on with the nursing home, because I think it impacts that budget to include things like the nursing home levy, the old building for the nursing home, the pending applications, how old they are, because that impacts whether there's really an opportunity to collect that money that would impact the budget. Whether they're pending applications, how long they've been pending, the $1 million that the nursing home owes the budget, because that doesn't sound like it's fleshed out, and when that might be repaid, and the impact of the budget. I think we need to understand all those issues, and I'd like to know what will happen with that, and have better information for the board.
You're saying when we have the budget discussion, or at the next
Either-
meeting, or with?
Either way, or
Okay.
or separately.
Okay.
Because I think those are big impacts for the budget.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now the meeting is adjourned.